Doctor, my eyes have seen the years and the slow parade of fears without crying. Now I want to understand. I have done all that I could.
The year was 1972. The song is Dr. My Eyes, which means today on the Song Facts podcast, we are talking about the one and only Jackson Browne.
Tell me what is wrong. Was I unwise to leave them open?
Song facts. Get your song facts right here. Get your song facts.
Hello and welcome to the Song Facts podcast. My name is Corey O'Flanagan and I am your host. I hope you're having a wonderful day. As always, this podcast is part of the Pantheon Podcast Network. And thank you so much for being here. Let's get into it. In early 2020, our guest Justin Cox decided to take a close look at Browne's career and put out 12 episodes of his podcast, After the Deluge, an unofficial Jackson Browne podcast. He learned a lot along the way and even had the distinct pleasure of interviewing the man himself, which he released as a 13th episode recently. Jackson Browne has also recently released his latest album, Downhill from Everywhere, and we'll be following that up with a tour as well, so please kick back and enjoy my conversation with Justin Cox, going deep into all things Jackson Browne. I hope you enjoyed this as much as I did.
As I have wandered through this world, and as each moment has unfurled.
All right, well, we are here with Justin Cox, and Justin is the host of After the Deluge, an unofficial, which I love that you specify, Jackson Browne podcast, which looks like came to fruition pre-COVID and then kind of blossomed into a quarantine project. Is that kind of the gist of it?
Yeah, I did like 4 of the interviews for it, like the fall before COVID, and then just kind of like I had the idea and I liked the interviews and stuff, but it just was like actually launching it was tough. And I thought, maybe sometime down the line, but yeah, that I didn't think actively of it as a response to COVID, but in reality it was, right? It was. My life was different and it just was. And a funny thing about the unofficial Jackson Browne podcast thing is that it started off as After the Deluge, a Jackson Browne podcast, and like 7 or 8 episodes in, I'd exchanged a little bit of emails. I sent an email the day I launched it or the day before, so that I did the courtesy of like letting his management know I was making this podcast, but not so soon that it would stop me from doing it, but soon enough that it was before it launched kind of thing. And that got ignored. And then like 8 weeks in, I think they started hearing about it, and what they came back to, and then they replied to my email. And then a few weeks after that, they said, "Hey, can you change the name to an unofficial Jackson Browne podcast?" Which I took to be, I actually was happy with, because it was like, okay, what they're saying is, because I mean, I was playing songs on it. I was playing it at the sort of, there's a gray area with how long you can play songs, but I don't know. It wasn't like sanctioned in any way. And so it was like, I think they like it, but they don't, but they're getting asked about it. Like they've heard of it. They're hearing about it.
Well, that's where my head would have gone is, wow, they've heard of this and they're not telling me to shut it down. Mm-hmm. They're not mad that I seem to be playing the songs. And so I'll just keep going, which I think is fantastic. So give me a quick breakdown of, or, me, the listeners, everyone, what this podcast is, and then essentially how it came to be. Like, why'd you choose Jackson Browne?
How it came to be, this is kind of funny. This is going to make me sound like this is like a like my nightly routine in my life, but it's not, which isn't even a thing I necessarily need to like say as a qualifier, but I got high, like smoked some weed and was like binging down into the Jackson Browne Wikipedia page, because that's like the kind of thing I do when that's the activity I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I remember I knew he made these 5 albums in the 70s, like that I think are amazing. I think they're about like my favorite 5 album stretch, and like I've felt that way for a long time. But in this kind of moment, I remember realizing like, wait, he made the first three in 72, 73, and 74. These are
Yeah.
like three of my favorite albums ever. And they are 3 years in a row. This is crazy. And I remember my wife walking into the room and me like saying that in sort of like person way down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. Like, this is way more interesting to me than that. But I can say definitively that little like moment was like what planted the seed. It wasn't like till months later that I like thought about what it would be and everything. And I knew I wanted loose conversations with people that could be either musicians or fans or writers or whatever.
Yeah.
And I knew I wanted, and then at some point along the line, I had the idea, like, what would the intro be? And I thought, the intro for each one is like a look through the Rolling Stone review that came out at the time.
Which I thought was great to like give it that sense of present day, like being there in the moment, kind of what people were thinking at the time versus the ability to the 2020 vision of looking back.
Totally. It's like take like to pull a random band like Weezer or something like that. You just, anyone who would write anything about them right now would look at like all these things that are so different that they did, and good, the bad, the weird, the whatever. But in the moment when they just make like like Pinkerton after their Blue album or something, you don't know what's coming next. You have zero idea. It could be their last album. It could be the full direction they're going, and you're kind of in that moment. And I love the idea of a critic, what they thought in the moment that this person was choosing to do.
Yeah, especially in that time when there was so much coming out. And it was just kind of really the heyday of what we think of oldies and classic rock and all that. Like it was just this boon of music coming out, especially where he was. Because I remember reading some story about, I think it was the Eagles, two of the members of the Eagles and him living in a house together. And like Glenn Frey, one of those guys, was like, Jackson Browne like showed me how you be a professional musician and songwriter. Like he would wake up every morning, he lived in our basement or something like that, and I would just hear him like boil a kettle of tea and just sit at the piano and start hammering some things out, writing stuff down. And then he would just do this over and over again every day, all day. And I was like, oh wow, like I got to take it this fucking seriously if I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, it's like I think Glenn Frey probably naturally had the ability to write a hook and a catchy thing, but to write a song, like he kind of was like through osmosis through like his floor or his ceiling. I can't remember who was on top and who was on bottom of that like apartment complex, but was like, you're right, he was like learning.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so 12 episodes was the idea. That's what you did initially, and then as we kind of discussed here, you got the opportunity to interview Jackson Browne himself. So I have to ask, just what was that day like? Take me through that moment when you realized that was going to happen and how that came to fruition. This would just be, I recently had something happen with Donna Jean Godchow and got an opportunity to have her on my show. And it was kind of that same thing where like, I'm wearing a Grateful Dead shirt right now. I'm like, I'm going to fucking get to interview a member of the Grateful Dead. Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, to be honest with you, like when the time came that there was a period when it became a yes that was before the period when it became like a calendared item with a time and stuff like that. And I didn't tell that many people. I told my friend Ryan Page, who I did like a Beatles and Rolling Stones podcast with, who was like a helpful person and like a friend I talked to a bunch in like getting going on the Jackson Browne one.
And maybe with the fact that today Charlie Watts passed, we should be talking about that podcast, but we'll have you back to talk about that because I've listened to all those episodes. That was a great thing. I was on that actually. That was amazing. And that was very cool to just compare those year for year. This is just really good angles to come at these things, I think. But sorry, go on.
Yeah, no, if you'd ever want to do that, I'm sure Ryan would love to join too.
Yeah.
But so I kind of was like internally excited, but hesitant to think that it was actually gonna kind of happen, you know, like I had zero idea how much he or anyone knew or thought about it or whatever. I only knew that I heard from a lot of people and it got listened to more than I expected. And I felt like, all right, that's enough for me to try to pursue this process of getting an interview. But the thing is, his album was supposed to come out last year. He was actually weirdly one of the first kind of prominent in my world, at least, names to get COVID. He got COVID like a week or two before Tom Hanks even, I think.
Okay.
And I didn't not like horrible symptoms or anything like that, but he had it. And it was around the time I'd launched the podcast, which was interesting. But either way, to like continue with COVID, like that album got pushed back. That album and a tour with James Taylor got pushed back a year. So I think there was a point sometime that last year that I like planted the seed about like, hey, would he be interested in an interview? And it wasn't like maybe it was like a one time ignored and the next time like, yeah, like let's see about that. Like he has a pretty casual management team that's like the same people from like road managers from back in the day. Like it's
okay. So this is like family at this point.
To a certain, I think so. I mean, I say that a little bit ignorantly, but it's the sense I have and what I've heard. And so then I think what I did, like once the album got pushed back, I waited until they announced a date, and then they announced a date. And then I waited, like I sent an email asking, I think almost each time there's probably something to learn in this. That was like, I think I got ignored most of the times I asked the first time. And then it was a matter of like, I want to do this interview around the time this album comes out. How long do I wait before I ask again without being annoying, but still being like in enough time? And they said, yeah. And they said, and then like a week later, I said, hey, do you have a date? And then I could tell I did it on a date when he was like sitting in his kitchen doing Zoom calls and like multiple interviews.
Yep.
So I had my hour and I was just really excited and like I waited. I got a preview thing of the album and I waited till like 2 days before listening to that, but listened like super intently. Then I listened kind of passively while working. Then I listened in a lot of different ways. Then I listened while sitting and like taking notes and thinking about what to talk about. And then it came and I was like nervous for about 10 minutes. And then there was like kind of like honestly a moment that it felt like it clicked into something very real and natural and good. And the whole thing felt that way. It was like
I can tell you
special.
from a listener, and I listened recently, I listened yesterday to the entire interview, and it felt that way. It felt very natural. And I don't know if I would have been able to hold it together as much as you did. Like when you think about I was born in 82. When you think about that, he was doing this for more than a decade before I was born, and you start thinking about that kind of legacy. How do you even start putting together interview questions for an hour? Like, I'm going to need a weekend with you, man. I got to really dive into this.
And what I think I realized, like why it maybe took a second, but it found that kind of feeling. Cause yeah, I did feel that way, was that like, I didn't even think too much about this going in, but like kind of baked into what that interview was going to be was he's going to talk to what, like Rolling Stone and Mark Maron and the guy from the Foo Fighters, Chris Shiflett. Like I listen to these, but they're interviewing a different person every week, not even always a musician. Whereas this is like a podcast about Jackson Browne. It's like a chance for him to not talk about the same thing every single time, or talk about songs from the 70s only when he's got an album coming out in 2021, you know?
Yeah.
So I think the way that worked out, like it would be bad for me as an interviewer to let him just talk about like a new 2021 record and like climate change the whole time, but letting that be part of it and going into that and dovetailing that into stuff he did in the past, I think it kind of opened a door and allowed for a natural conversation like that to happen.
Did you have a vision of what you thought he might be like going in, and then get some different takeaways after the fact?
Definitely did get some different takeaways after the fact, but I had generally a sense. I think maybe this is a thing I share with him and probably have already put that on display in this conversation, is like speaking in like long exploratory meandering sentences that you figure out where they're going when they get there, you know, which is pretty, because I do edit the podcast. And so it was a little bit like, that's why the first 10 minutes were a little stressful. I was like, he was kind of really going all over and I didn't know where it was going to go. But it was, I was actually told about that a couple of days before by a guy named Paul Ingalls, who does like public radio work, really good interviewer, puts together these sort of like legacy, like full career spanning shows. And we connected, he'd heard the podcast and we connected sometime midway through and just kind of talked about it and everything. And he interviewed him as well. And he interviewed him for like a long, like full album kind of thing. If you look him up, Paul Ingalls, if you're a Jackson Browne fan, you'll love this interview. But he said, like, if you got what you think is an hour's worth of questions, or I didn't have like specific questions just to ask, but like if you have an hour's worth of stuff to talk about, you put the things you definitely want to talk about pretty early, because that hour is going to run away from you. Like it's going to be long tangent type sentences and conversations. So
Yeah. I
in
can
that
see
way,
that.
Yeah.
In my experience as someone who's conducting interviews a lot of time, I find that to try and be a little bit front heavy with things, because it does tend to meander. And then like answers to questions provoke more questions for me a lot of the time. And so I think it just kind of makes sense in that way. What I kind of found with him, with your interview with him, was his recall was unbelievable. I mean, one of the first things that you guys ended up talking about was Somebody's Baby.
She's got to be somebody's baby. She must be somebody's baby. She's got to be somebody's baby. 'Cause she's so fine. She's probably somebody's only light gonna shine tonight. Yeah, she's probably somebody's baby. Alright.
Just his detail on kind of outlining, going back to that recording session, how that song came to be, I felt like was really fascinating. And did you think that you were going to get that much detail out of him for going back in the past?
I think I listened to a few interviews, like whoever has done his media and like the album rollout, he's done like some podcasts and stuff, which I hadn't heard him be on before.
Yeah.
And I think that kind of gave me the sense of like, man, he's just sort of quick and automatic, and it's all like very sharp and,
sharp.
Yeah, good memory. And so a lot of those like little details and stuff surprised me, like to just have him say like, oh, I didn't like that song.
Yeah.
I was talking to my therapist how I didn't like the song. My therapist told me, what's more relatable than wanting to be loved. And it's like, holy shit. That's like, but you don't expect that. That's like the best answer you could possibly get about a pop song, you know?
Oh, absolutely. And then just to be like, he had the free reign of they were like, I don't care what you say in between. You just got to come back to this. They got to be somebody's baby in the end, but I don't care how you get there.
Yeah. Just writing to that. It's so funny.
Yeah.
Which, is like not his way. Like it's like a pattern that I think I've found, that is like a song like Somebody's Baby and a song like Take It Easy.
Well, I'm running down the road trying to loosen my load. I got 7 women on my mind. 4 they're gonna own me, 2 they're gonna stone me. 1 said she's a friend of mine. Take it easy, take it easy. Don't let the sound of your own wheels drive you crazy. Lighten up while you still can.
Are probably 2 of his like most simple, catchy, clear-cut pop songs. Like there's a reason Take It Easy is an Eagles song, and that Somebody's Baby is like a soundtrack 80s like big pop song. And there are songs that like Glenn Fry helped finish Take It Easy and basically said like, he liked it more than Jackson Browne. Like Jackson Browne had hesitance around some of these like I think maybe the idea was like, is this overly simple? Or you could like say, maybe in your mind decide that that's dumb or something like that. That like, it's kind of cool that he had like an evolution on that in his head.
What were some of the most interesting facts about him and his songs that you learned, not only from him, but just kind of throughout the other 12 episodes as well?
Like about him, I think I was fascinated. It's like extremely fascinating to think about. First of all, like these days is
These days I seem to think a lot about the things that I forgot to do for you, and all the times I had the chance to.
is one of his biggest songs, and like Nico recorded it and stuff, and like Greg Allman recorded it, and it's like this like timeless song. He wrote it when he was 16.
God, I didn't know that.
It's completely hard, like unfathomable. So he wrote it when he was 16, and like what I didn't know was like, okay, you write that when you're 16, but you record that on your second album, and that doesn't. I always thought like, was he making that first album when he was like 18 then? But there's all this period of like travel across the country and into Europe and recording with the Velvet Underground and Nico and Warhol and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It's like a kind of a crazy amount of life to pack into like this very, like when he's very young. There's like a funny part that I like, part of me wanted to ask more, but part of me just liked it as it was, where he's talking about like living in Orange County as a kid, as a teenager, and going up to LA to like play with this band and see the scene, and someone saying, and him saying, I was coming down off acid, but I was down enough to drive, but the whole landscape around me was like looking like arteries flowing and everything like that. You're like, you're threading a real needle here as far as like if you were far enough down on coming from acid to this. But like to me, like that, I mean, I think in a certain way he's like that's like, it's like a little bit of like a virtuoso at that point if you're that young, but a through line that like I think was a thesis point, like a reason for the podcast for me, but was like completely validated over and over again and like, or reinforced maybe, is that he's sort of like, okay, brilliant and maybe like more poetic and everything than the Eagles or Bruce Springsteen, even, who like Bruce Springsteen has his like storytelling and everything, but like it's a different thing than what you can, in my opinion, you can safely call some of it cliche, but cliche in a way that's relatable to the masses. And a lot of
direct versus speaking in metaphors or things like that.
Yeah. And so there's those guys, right? Like big stadium, like Bruce Springsteen and Eagles, one thing, let's take them. Yep. And then the other two that I would talk about, like you mentioned, Bob Dylan or someone like Neil Young, there's a weird rough edge and weird, like sort of abstract poetry, mystery, even grit or something to them that Jackson Browne doesn't have. Jackson Browne, he's somewhere between those two things. And I think being somewhere between those two things is how you end up with the career he had, which is like, I can't decide. Is he underrated, or is he like actually completely multi-platinum, giant, popular, and I don't really know, you know?
Stay tuned for more Song Facts podcast right after this. Ever wonder how my voice is bouncing off your eardrums so clean and crispy? No? Well, let me tell you anyway. The Lyra microphone by AKG brings their legendary acoustic engineering to a versatile USB mic that delivers the highest quality audio in its class. USB connection. This is good for me because of the simplicity and the ability to just plug and play without an interface. You may have gathered from various episodes that I am doing this show on the road, so being that I record most interviews in a different location than the last, it is good for me to know that I have a high quality, easy to transport and use USB mic like the Lyra to make sure my sound is clean. Whether you're like me and recording a podcast, a musician recording vocals or an instrument, or if you need to do a voiceover for a YouTube channel, Lyra's innovative AKG adaptive capsule array adapts to your performance to record pristine audio. It has 4 versatile capture modes. What's a capture mode, you ask? That is how the mic picks up your voice. Just trust me, with these 4 options, it's really all you're going to need. With AKG Lyra, you'll be up and running in no time, no matter your experience level. There's no assembly, no need for separate audio interface, no fiddling with software settings. It just works right out of the box. And Lyra is something that is compatible with Windows, Mac, iOS, and Android devices, and all major recording softwares. So, if you're looking for a mic that offers ease of use along with a high quality sound, check out the AKG Lyra and look no further.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive. Progressive helps you get a great rate on car insurance, even if it's not with them. They have this nifty comparison tool that puts rates side by side, so you choose a rate and coverages that work for you. So, let's say you're interested in lowering your rate on your car insurance. Visit Progressive.com to get a quote with all the coverages you want. You'll see Progressive's rate, and then their tool will provide options from other companies, all lined up and easy to compare, so that all you have to do is choose the rate and coverages you like. Progressive gives you options so you can make the best choice for you. You could be looking forward to saving money in the very near future. More money for, say, a pair of noise-canceling headphones, an Instapot, more puzzles, whatever brings you joy. Get a quote today at Progressive.com. It's one small step you can do today that could make a big impact on your budget tomorrow. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Get your song facts right here.
It's hard to say someone with his career and his success is underrated, but he could be. And what I really liked how in the first episode you talked about, you separated his songwriting from his voice, because he does get put in this box of not having a great voice, which you could argue it either way. You really could. He's not Aretha Franklin, but the guy can sing. Like, you can't take that away from him. And I just find that really interesting to, I think if you listen to an interview, like your interview with Jackson Browne or any of his other ones, and what you said is like, he's very sharp. He answers your questions pretty directly. He might meander and like go off on some tangents and stuff like that, but you're going to get the answer. Versus if you listen to a Dylan interview, you might not understand what the hell he's saying. Like, he's going to show up, like when he showed up with that giant light bulb and they were asking about the light bulb and he was just like, given some fluff answer, and it only makes sense to him, but he's speaking as directly as he can, but that's just how he talks. It's just a completely different way. And that's how their songwriting is represented.
That's a good point. That's how words like fall out of Bob Dylan's mouth. And that's why those songs are so insane. Like, that's why it's like hard to comprehend how he's even writing them. Yeah. And you might not have any idea what he means, but they're making you feel a thing.
Going through this, because we're going to start to get into what another thing that kind of came to be. I don't think that, as far as I know, you didn't have anything to do with the Reddit thread that began to the bracket. Is that right? Someone else did this?
No, it was a dude named Alan who emailed me sometime midway through. It was an interesting kind of person that I heard from multiple times, were people in their like 20s and 30s that were like, there's no one for me to talk to about Jackson Browne. And so they're hearing about like, no, what friend, like you might have it. This kind of goes to the like Springsteen, Dylan, Neil Young, Eagles thing I was talking about. You're going to go into some dorm rooms and you're going to see like the Doors and the Bob Dylan, and you're going to see the stuff on posters and stuff, probably even still now or in like Hot Topic or whatever. You ain't seeing a Jackson Browne one in there. It's not happening. No. It's like the people you're going to talk to are like your parents or whatever kid kind of latched onto it for whatever reason and then grew up with it. And so this guy his name was Alan. I can't remember his last name now, but he emailed like just kind of talking about how he liked hearing it. And like, it was just like a cool opportunity to spend some time with that music, especially from someone like a similar age. He was a little younger though. And then like, I think I made the bracket. So what I made was the bracket itself, like the thing with the songs and the seating and everything like that. But all I did was like tweet it. And so that it did its little thing. It was like poorly designed to actually fill it out or anything. It was more of like a thought exercise. So it was like a thing I did in like the middle of it, like the off week when I recorded one with Ryan, like kind of like a middle like series episode. And then the guy, Alan, reached out toward the very end of it saying, hey, can I run that bracket as like a daily poll on the Jackson Browne subreddit? And so then now for the last like month, he's been doing a poll every single day. And it's like down to its last two. And it's not at the final. They're final four right now.
Okay. So did you base this 64? So for people listening, just to give you a little bit more detail on this, imagine your March Madness bracket, but this is just Jackson Browne songs. Is this based off of these 570s albums, or is this everywhere? Because I've looked at it, but it's hard to look at 64 but it's everything.
It's ridiculous to look at 64, but it's like, it's
ridiculous to get 64. What the scrutiny that you must have gone through to get that down and then do the seating. I just don't even know.
For sure I did, but I don't know. Honestly, the scrutiny is kind of fun. It's like anytime they do March Madness and there's like 2 or 3 teams, like bubble teams, they leave off and everyone gets mad. And it's like, this is just going to happen every single time, right? There has to be a dividing line on it. So even if you add 4 more, that just moves the dividing line.
Yeah.
But I can't say it's like a deluge of people pissed off about it, but it was people like and then the seating, I think I don't know if I did a great job on the seating. I think I did okay, but I don't think I did a great job.
Well, it's a thing that you can be, it's all just relative, right? Like it's your seeding. This guy
Yeah.
could have emailed you and been like, hey, I'm going to completely reseed this whole thing. Just because I didn't necessarily agree with yours. And are you okay with that? Or do you just want me to go with yours or whatever? It's a free world. I'll just do whatever I want.
Alan couldn't have done that, because this is a funny thing, is that he posts the polls on Reddit, and like a lot of like, it's awesome to see that people are voting daily in them. But then at the end of each round, he emails me the answers and says, can you update it on the thing? So I'm still being contracted out as the like graphic design person. And I made it so poorly that it looks like hell, like the like names all over it. It's such a messy looking bracket.
I've seen it. I can confirm it's not pretty, but it works. It's effective.
Yeah. I think the final seeds are 2 1 seeds, a 3 seed, and an 8 seed, if I remember.
Which I thought was absolutely shocking, because and I love that this is, what do you think your sample size is on this voting?
It seems, I do not know, but I know when I click on the things, it seems like it's between like 20 and 50 people per each vote.
I think that's fine. I mean, that's over the course of however many matches that's going to be plenty of people's opinions. But I was surprised, because I thought that especially your top 4 seeds, which is where I kind of started and ended my analysis of the entire bracket, was I felt like they were pretty strong. But as soon as it started to go and I started following it, I obviously had my disagreements. And I'm just, this is what I would have done if I was Alan. I would have said, will you give me your prediction for the final 4, and then tell me who you think the champion is going to be, and like write that on a little note, put it in a hat, put it to the side, and then we'll circle back to that. Did you do that?
I did not do that. In my head, I can like say who I think is going to win. Like in my mind, These Days is going to win.
Yeah.
Like which is insane, because like we said, you write the first notable song you ever write in your life is the best song you write in your life. Like, it's crazy. But I think it gets at like, that's a pretty simple and direct song. And I think I mentioned that like he in like his album rollout, like they've been like pretty good, and there's like been a lot more activity and sort of like really like fun engagement on his like social media stuff, the way there never was before. You know, it was like a pretty quiet scene on like Jackson Brown Instagram, but they've been sharing like Instagram stories of people covering his songs.
Yeah.
And like These Days is by far the most popular one that gets covered on there. And it's not hard to play. And I think it's like probably walks the line between like good, iconic, poignant, and very, very like kind of easy to just enjoy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I think that for me personally, if I'm putting myself in your shoes, who just kind of dreams up this podcast project and puts this out there, and the 2 things that come from it are this huge bracket that I put together, and then actually people that I have no idea, somebody takes that over and makes it into something that's going to be completed by fan votes. Like, that's one incredible thing. And then the fact that you actually ended up being able to interview the man himself is just incredible. So great job on putting the podcast together. I've got to ask your personal final 4 and why for each song.
Okay. I probably won't do these necessarily in the right order that I have them in. I don't think I can pick an order, but we did in the middle of the season, I did an episode with my friend Ryan that was sort of like I need to take a break and we'll just have a conversation with each other about some of our favorite, like, I think we gave ourselves prompts like favorite guitar solos, favorite lyrics, and stuff like that. And that was so I could like accumulate more interviews and everything. And the song that I come away as my favorite is Farther On.
In my early years, I hid my tears and passed my days alone, adrift on an ocean of loneliness. My dreams like nets were thrown to catch the love that I'd heard of.
That I know is my favorite. It's moved around some, but that's like what I would consider to be sort of a maybe like third, fourth most notable song on Late for the Sky for most people, but like the bracket thing's funny because it went way farther than I thought. It beat songs that I thought that I didn't think it would. So maybe that's not the case, but that song was in, he did a documentary called Going Home in the early 90s when he put out an album called I'm Alive. And it's like combination of like a live show. I think it's on like, I think it was like a Disney documentary. So I think it might be on Disney Plus or some streaming app, but really good documentary. And they kind of like early within the first 15 minutes, there's sort of like taking you from the present back into the past kind of moment. And they hit you with a version of they play farther on. And then you kind of get this montage with a lot of like black and white Polaroid pictures moving and scenes from that time. And like, you know, I know, I think it had an effect on me. Like, you know, the way like a montage thing can, it feels a little cheap, but it like helped me find the beauty in this song that it is. It just really did. And I think that can change because it has changed. I've had different favorite songs, some of which I'll talk about right now, but Farther On, which is on Late for the Sky, my favorite. Okay. While I'm there, I'll say the song Late for the Sky, which is track 1.
All the words had all been spoken, and somehow the feeling still wasn't right. And still we continued on through the night, tracing our steps from the beginning until they vanished into the
that's also in a movie that's in an iconic scene from Taxi Driver, which I also like. This is kind of weird to say, but like I fell in love with Late for the Sky long before that. And it's just piano song that's not just him and a piano. It builds up. You get like the David Lindley guitar solo stuff, beautiful harmonies, incredible lyrics. But then I'm not like I've like caught up with a lot of like classic movies later in my life. And so I was like well into my 20s when I watched Taxi Driver.
Yeah.
And you get this scene that comes up, and then like the like David Lindley slide guitar comes into that. And I'm just like absolutely like nailed with bricks. Cause it's kind of a heavy moment in the movie and everything. And it's like, I've like good on Scorsese.
He knows what he's doing, man. He puts that music in there so perfectly.
Really knows what he's doing. Yeah. And so that song, just an amazing song. So those are both from Late from the Sky. There's a song toward the end of the album For Every Man, which I remember in my childhood being like late teenage years, being my favorite Jackson Browne album, which at some point that shifted over and it became Late for the Sky. But I think like For Every Man kind of feels a little more like strummed acoustic guitar heavy. Yeah. I don't even know if that's necessarily the case, but it feels that way to me. And that's what I was like learning to play at the time and everything. But there's a song called Ready or Not toward the end of that.
Some understanding when we see what the future will bring. I met her in a crowded barroom, one of those typical Hollywood scenes. I was doing my very best Bogart, but I was having trouble getting into her jeans. I punched an unemployed actor, defending
much more. It's kind of different than your typical Jackson Browne song. It's about a guy getting his girlfriend pregnant, and he's got these lines like, "Baby's feeling funny in the morning. She says she's got a lot on her mind. Nature didn't give her any warning, but she's going to have to leave her wild ways behind, or we're going to have to leave our wild ways behind," or something. And some of them kind of funny, and some of them it like feels weirdly light for a Jackson Browne song, but it's about like our life is changing and becoming domesticated, and it's just like a brilliant song. And then I mean there's an added thing to it that I think he either doesn't play it or very rarely plays it, or maybe didn't play it for a while, is the woman that's about died.
Oh, okay.
So which is so very sad. And And then I'm trying, I had like a couple in mind, and I'm like, for my fourth one. Cause like what I would say is somebody's baby like rose in my estimation so much during that podcast. Cause I did one, that album was that episode was one called Lawyers in Love, and then added Somebody's Baby because it came out right around that time. And so it was an opportunity to spend a ton of time talking about and exploring that song. But I don't think I can.
It
like
didn't
it's just
take it over.
it's an amazing song, but I don't think I can go fully that far. And so I think the fourth one, what I'll say, is The Pretender, the song The Pretender.
I'll go on home and lay my body down. And when the morning light comes streaming in, I'll get up and do it again. Amen. Say it again. Amen. I wanna know what became of the changes we waited for love to bring.
Which of those first 5 albums, Pretender is my least favorite of those 5 as far as like the full album goes. I think maybe because it feels like it bounces around. I don't feel, I loved a lot of the songs on it, or most of the songs on it, but I don't feel like I settle into like a full album experience with it.
Yeah.
But the final song is the song The Pretender, which is kind of like a exploration of daily life and monotony that is a thing that I know I allow myself to be afraid of falling into, or afraid of. It's a extremely powerful song. And that's another one that I think that's in the final 4. I think that's, no, maybe it just lost, but so yeah, Pretender, that's my 4th one.
Okay. I mean, you can't argue that. I mean, you're the expert between the two of us. I'll tell you that right now. I mean, my Jackson Browne, it goes back to movies. My parents were huge Eagles fans, Fleetwood Mac, Stones, that kind of stuff. But I don't think that they introduced me to Jackson Browne. I think I heard Jackson Browne on the Forrest Gump soundtrack, and that was it. And then probably I knew that he had written The Loadout. I think I attacked you and Alan on Twitter because The Loadout came out of the bracket way too fucking early, in my opinion. I know. And I was just absolutely shocked by that.
I can hear the sound of slamming doors and folding chairs, and that's a sound they'll never know. Roll them cases out and lift them amps, and haul them trusses down and get them up them ramps. 'Cause when it comes to moving me, you know you guys are.
It's possible my seating is to blame, but maybe not.
It's true. You never know. I mean, maybe just people aren't as smitten with that as I am, but I was just like, I've never heard a song written for the crew. And I just love that. And I was like, way to give them some props. And then just to like this vision that he paints of all, like, the fans are gone, the crew's like unloading the stage, getting ready to go to the next spot. Who knows where that is, but I'm still just sitting here doing my thing at the piano. I just love the vision that put in my head. So if it was up to me, that would be the number 1, but I wouldn't do it without Stay next to it.
Yeah,
it would 100%. Have to seeg in right into Stay. I don't think those songs work individually. I think they do, but I think they work way too well together to ever do them separately.
I think I've had the experience of being in like a grocery store or something where I heard The Loadout and it didn't cut into Stay, and I was just like, absolutely not.
It's like an itch you can't scratch.
Yeah, like, no, it's not. You can't do this.
I remember I was in Denver a few years ago taking piano lessons, and I heard that song for the first time in a long time on the radio. And it was like one of these moments where I like pulled over just so I didn't have to focus on driving. I could just listen and close my eyes and just listen to the song. Cause I was just like, wow, I just love this.
They actually do, like, the part where they do the, like, the song itself just stands up, but then the part where they start talking about like the music they're listening to on the bus, and it snaps into like a country and Western sound and then a disco sound. It's like, that's something that came up a ton in the podcast, and something I was pretty ignorant to going in was like the session musicians who played with him,
Oof.
who like kind of came together and became his band around that time, how good they were, because it's like, it's good in a way that the same way that a lot of people are talking about Charlie Watts today. And a lot of like friend Ryan, like kind of educated me on Charlie Watts a little bit, was like the ultimate, like so good, but in a way that's purely aimed at serving the song, not in like a 10-minute John Bonham drum solo kind of way.
Yep. I like that a lot. I mean, those little 4 or 8 bars or whatever they are within that song, to just immediately be able to cut to R&B, to disco, to whatever. I can't even think of all the other ones that they did, but yeah, and it's seamless, and it's just, yeah, it's really good. What an amazing thing to have been able to go and see them in like the late 70s or something like that, like when he's got these 5 albums behind him, and he's finally able to just put together this insane set list. Like I can't even imagine.
That would be the moment to see him.
Yeah.
That's like a magical moment. I pulled up the bracket while we were talking, and so yeah, the Loadout, and hey, cheers to me. I combined the Loadout and Stay as one song on this bracket. So did that. Which is just an even more mind-boggling to me that it's gone. And it was gone. What did it leave in the second round? Yeah, so it beat Everywhere I Go, which is like a kind of like white guy reggae song from the 90s. It's funny. That's a slam dunk. It's a 2 seed. But then, yeah, so this surprises me. The next one it faced was Farther On, the song that I said is my favorite song. But I would 100% predict Loadout and Stay would beat that.
In terms of just mass appeal, yeah.
I just like, so that's like kind of where I say, like, it could be that because it's such a niche podcast and it's being done on the, like, that maybe a lot of people saw that documentary and had that same effect, or it could be that the album Late for the Sky, like a lot of songs from Late for the Sky advanced far on that. So it could be that like album has grown like sort of in like consensus, kind of like it's like snowballed as the favorite album or something. Because I would not guess that. I would not expect it.
Yeah. Well, I want to just thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. I'm enamored with it. I'm about to take off for a week trip, and I am going to be listening to the remaining. I listened to number 1 and number 13. So I've bookended your podcast. I'm going to listen to the middle now. And I encourage anyone listening to go. If you're a Jackson Browne fan, you'll love it. If you're not, I think you will be by the end, because I think you do an amazing job from what I've heard so far.
I appreciate that, Corey. And since this is Song Facts podcast, I'll say, like, if you go, I love a lot of the episodes, and this is to you too, who's about to go travel. The episode 5 is the Running on Empty one, which is the one when you say like that would be the time to see him live. He has all those albums behind him. That album's recorded on the road, in hotel rooms, on buses, at live shows. Some songs split between them. The Running on Empty episode with a woman named Holly Gleason, a really, really incredible music writer, is like a barrage of song facts. There's a ton there. Just such a unique album, such a unique way to do a live album, and I came away learning a ton. So good starting place.
Thank you so much to Justin. What an incredible wealth of information. Guys, if you love Jackson Browne, or you're just interested to find out more, go check out his podcast, After the Deluge. And Jackson Browne himself, along with James Taylor, is currently on tour around the United States. So check it out. See if he's coming near you. You will not regret it. As always, guys, for the stories behind the songs, go to songfacts.com. Thank you.